Hello and welcome to How It's Played Labs, a series where I take inspiration from non-Paizo games and apply their concepts to Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today we'll be borrowing the multi-part opponents and phases rules from Fabula Ultima to make our bosses more narratively interesting and memorable. If you've ever played a console JRPG, then you're probably familiar with epic boss fights where you have to target specific limbs, cores, or heads to disable attacks or reveal weaknesses. And that's what we're aiming for today, turning a single boss monster into something that has multiple targetable parts that can be crippled along the journey to defeating them. The core idea we'll be adapting comes from Fabula Ultima, specifically its Natural Fantasy Atlas supplement. For those not familiar with Fabula Ultima, it is described as a tabletop JRPG and is heavily inspired by old-school Japanese console RPGs, most notably Final Fantasy. If you're curious about that system and want to know more, I'll leave some links in the description to a series of Fabula Ultima videos made by friend of the channel, Bad Luck Gamer. Now, Fabula Ultima and Pathfinder 2e are different systems, so a direct port doesn't work. What follows is a framework for adapting this concept using Pathfinder 2e's existing mechanics as building blocks. So it's important to note this is not official Paizo material and is just my attempt to apply Fabula Ultima's concepts to Pathfinder. As such, this is strictly fan-made material, has not been thoroughly playtested, and your mileage may vary. So think of this video as a fun thought experiment instead of being hard rules. So what's the basic idea in Fabula Ultima? Well, a multi-part opponent is a single, often very large creature treated as multiple distinct enemies in terms of targeting and sometimes defense. You might have a head, claws, a tail, maybe some turrets on a techno-fantasy construct. The key is that targeting and destroying each of these parts has a direct impact. Maybe it disables a specific attack, it changes the creature's stats, or even triggers a whole new phase of the fight. To bring this into Pathfinder, we'll need a framework that pulls inspiration from Fabula Ultima, but still respects Pathfinder's rules. First, your creature still has a primary stat block. Armor class, saves, skills, perception speed, resistances, weaknesses, all that good stuff. It also has a main hit point pool. This represents its overall life force. Usually, the creature is only truly defeated when this main hit points pool hits 0, and to differentiate this from the monster's different parts, I'm going to refer to this as the monster's main body. In addition, the monster will have a number of parts. Think head, claws, tails, wings, power core, and so on. Each part has its own separate hit points pool, and this is key. Think of it as the durability of just that one component. Maybe it has 25% to as much as 50% of the creature's main hit points. That's usually a good starting point, depending on how many parts there are and the purpose of each part. Each part is also going to have abilities. Tie specific strikes, activities, reactions, or even passive abilities to each part. A claw lets the monster grab. The head has a breath weapon, and so on. If the part is broken, then that ability goes away. And optionally, you can add part defenses. You could give parts slightly different armor classes or unique weaknesses and resistances compared to what the main body has. For example, armored legs might resist physical damage better than the monster's fleshy torso does, but to keep things simple at first, I recommend just using the main armor class and saving throw bonuses for all parts. That can work too. Players need to declare which part they're targeting. If they just say, "I attacked the dragon," assume that they're attacking the main body or ask them for more clarification. Using this system, all monster parts are treated as occupying all the same squares as the monster. For example, you wouldn't take the 3x3 token of a huge-sized monster and dictate that this square is the right claw part and this square is the left claw part. Since there are no facing rules in Pathfinder and there are existing precedents, for example, a rider occupying all the same spaces as their mount, or the leader occupying all the same spaces as their troop, in this system, each monster part occupies all the same spaces as the monster usually occupies. Another consideration is even though monster parts have their own hit point pools and are targeted separately from the main body, they're all part of the same creature, meaning the creature as a whole can only be targeted once per effect. Let's take a look at Chain Lightning as an example. Here it says, targets one creature plus any number of additional creatures, and the electricity then arcs to another creature within 30 feet of the first target, jumps to another creature within 30 feet of the target, and so on. You can end the chain at any point. You can't target the same creature more than once. Since monster parts are all the same singular creature, you couldn't use Chain Lightning to arc from a dragon's head to its wings, to its tail, to each of its claws, and so on. You would choose either one part of the dragon or its main body to be targeted by Chain Lightning before it arcs off to the next creature. So bottom line, any effect may only target a single part of the monster or its main body, never more. And last, parts are never targeted by area effects. Any spell, bomb, or other ability that deals area damage may only affect the creature's main body. Explosions and similar effects are simply too unpredictable to aim at a specific body part, but as always, GMs are free to roll differently if doing so makes sense in their games. And a general rule of thumb is if you're not sure if an effect could target a specific part, then apply it to only the creature's main body. Now let's talk about damaging a part. When a player hits a part and deals damage, that damage is applied to both the part's hit points and the creature's main body hit points, with each location's resistances and weaknesses applied separately. Why? Well, because it ensures players always feel like they're making progress towards ending the fight, which is usually accomplished by depleting the main body's hit points, while they're also working towards the tactical goal of disabling a part. It represents overall trauma. A big hit to a limb hurts the whole creature. Also, difficulty might spiral out of control if each part is treated as an additional layer of hit points on top of the already existing main body hit points. Let's look at an example. Consider this Clockwork Behemoth. Its main body has 150 hit points and resistance 10 to physical. It has an arcane gem part with 30 hit points and only resistance 5 to physical. A player targets the gem with a warhammer and deals 14 bludgeoning damage. The gem suffers 9 damage, 14 raw damage minus its resistance of 5, therefore its hit points drop to 21. At the same time, the main body suffers 4 damage, the original 14 applied by the warhammer minus the main body's resistance of 10, so its hit points drop to 146. In this system, we have progress on both fronts, lowering the main body hit points while also lowering the part's hit points, and each location has its own resistances and weaknesses. Now let's make it a little more interesting. Let's say the Behemoth's main body is weak 5 to electricity, but its arcane gem is insulated and has resistance electricity 10. A player targets the gem with electric arc and deals 15 electricity damage. The gem suffers 5 damage, 15 damage minus its resistance 10 to electricity, so its hit points drop to 16. And the main body suffers 20 damage, 15 plus its weakness 5 to electricity, so its hit points drop to 126. Again, all the damage is applied separately to the targeted part and the monster's main body. This may seem complicated, but remember in most cases, the different parts will likely have the same resistances and weaknesses as the main body. But this rule also allows creatures like a 5-headed chromatic dragon to have different weaknesses and resistances for each of its heads. So what happens when a part's hit points reach 0? Well, it becomes broken, just like any other object in Pathfinder. A broken part loses its functionality. The creature can't use any actions, reactions, or abilities tied specifically to that part. Optionally, a broken part could also impose penalties, like a broken leg reducing speed. And we should also take a moment to discuss healing. Healing effects that typically have targets can be used to heal either the creature's main body or a single part, and just like how damaging a part applies the damage to both that part and the main body, applying healing to a part also heals the main body the same amount. For example, the heal spell targets one living creature. This could be used to heal either the creature's main body or a single part, and if it targets a part, then the healing is applied to both that part and to the main body. Yes, a downside of this is there's no benefit to targeting just the main body, but this rule is simple and consistent with how damaging a multi-part opponent works. And area healing effects, like the 3-action version of the heal spell, only restore the creature's main body. For other effects like fast healing, these likely apply to all the creature's parts and their main body once. You wouldn't multiply the fast healing per part and then apply that total to the main body. But keep in mind that under normal circumstances, a broken part may not be made functional again through normal healing. Once a part's hit points are reduced to 0, it becomes broken, and it remains broken for the remainder of the encounter. The reason for this is twofold. First, breaking a part should feel like a significant moment in the narrative, and players may feel cheated if that accomplishment is taken away from them by healing. And second, allowing a broken part to be restored may significantly increase the challenge of the encounter. So if a dragon's claw is broken and the dragon's main body receives healing, it may become healthier overall, but its claw is still crippled. Outside of combat, the GM can decide how long it takes for this boss monster to heal up and recover the use of its broken parts. Multi-part creatures still get their usual 3 actions in 1 reaction per turn, it just can't use actions that are tied to broken parts. If it has 2 claws and 1 is broken, it can still attack with the other. Also apply conditions like frightened, stunned, or grabbed to the main creature as these affect the creature as a whole. However, you may want to allow part-specific conditions for dramatic effect and the rule of cool. For example, you might allow a barbarian to grab a dragon's tail to prevent it from making tail strikes, or holding its mouth shut to prevent it from using its breath weapon. As usual, cases like these are entirely left up to the GM to decide if they'll allow them. Okay, breaking parts is cool, but we can make it even more dynamic with phases and triggers, which are also inspired by how Fabula Ultima handles some of their multi-part bosses. A phase is just one distinct stage of a fight. The boss might change tactics, use new abilities, or the environment around them might shift. And a trigger is what causes the shift into a new phase. Breaking a specific part could be a perfect trigger for these. Other triggers could be hitting hit point thresholds, like becoming bloodied at 50% of the main body's hit points. Triggers could also be players interacting with the environment in a certain way, or even just after a certain number of rounds have passed. But since this video is about multi-part opponents, we're going to focus on phase triggers being caused by damage. So let's go back to our Clockwork Behemoth. We have a phase trigger that says the arcane gem part becomes broken, and when that is triggered, a new phase starts. Phases are all about change, so what changes when the Behemoth's arcane gem is shattered? Well, first, the Behemoth loses its gem-powered energy blast. It gains a steam vent attack that deals fire damage in a cone area. Its tactics change to become a very aggressive melee fighter, and also it starts grappling its enemies. And its stats change. The weakness to electricity is gone, but now it has gained a weakness to cold damage. So why do we use phases? Phases make boss fights feel like a journey. They reward players for achieving tactical goals like breaking apart, they keep the fight from getting stale, they ramp up the tension, and they allow for cool narrative moments. So we've established that attacking parts lets you do something cool and powerful. You can disable specific monster abilities. Normally, you can't prevent a dragon from using its breath weapon, but with this system, targeting and breaking its head can achieve that. But here's the crucial part of design philosophy to make this work and keep encounters challenging. It shouldn't ever be a free lunch. And by that I mean, if attacking a part always gives you a massive advantage in that it can disable an ability and at the same time also damages the main body just like a normal hit, then there's really no downside here. The players will always attack the parts, and therefore that removes any real tactical choice. So to maintain balance and create interesting decisions, there needs to be a trade-off. The significant benefit of disabling a powerful monster ability should come with a roughly equivalent cost, risk, or consequence. Think of it like this. The game is letting you do something extraordinary like removing a breath weapon, so there should also be an extraordinary consequence or challenge involved. This cost can come in two main forms. First are front-end costs. These make attacking the part itself harder or riskier than attacking the main body. For example, this could come in the form of higher defenses. The part might have a higher armor class and reflex bonus, making it harder to hit accurately. Maybe its head is smaller and moving around in such a way that it becomes harder to hit. This could come in the form of resistances. The part could have a resistance that the main body doesn't, especially resistance physical, meaning most of your hits have to overcome that threshold first before they apply any damage. For example, the dragon's head could have larger scales that are angled to deflect away physical attacks. And another form of front-end cost could be triggered reactions. Attacking the part might provoke an immediate defensive reaction. For example, striking a giant scorpion's tail only for it to instantly lash back at you with its stinger as a reaction. Those are all front-end costs that make attacking the part more difficult or pose a narratively interesting consequence for doing so. Therefore, logically, the second type of costs are back-end costs. These are consequences that happen after you successfully break the part. First up are dangerous phase triggers, and this is a big one. Successfully breaking a key part might push the monster into an even more dangerous phase. You stopped the breath weapon, but now the dragon is enraged, so it's hitting faster with its tail and claws. The second kind of back-end costs are negative effects. Breaking a part could have a direct negative consequence. Maybe shattering a construct's power core causes an energy explosion damaging everyone nearby, or breaking a spawning sack on a monster releases a swarm of weaker minions into the fight. And the last kind of back-end cost could be a shift in resistances and weaknesses. Breaking a part might remove one resistance, but expose or create another, thereby forcing the party to have to adapt their tactics. So let's take one more look at our example of a Clockwork Behemoth. The benefit of breaking its arcane gem is you disable its main energy blast, but there needs to be a cost for this, either on the front end or on the back end. A potential front-end cost may be giving the gem a bonus to armor class and reflex saves. As a smaller target, so its armor class and reflex bonus are increased by 2, 3, or 4 points. Or it could have a higher resistance than the main body, meaning attacks targeting it need to overcome a minimal amount before they can start chipping away at its hit points. Or another possible front-end cost could be hitting it causes a bright flash of light that could dazzle the attacker. So those are possible front-end costs, things that make it less desirable to attack the part in the first place. You could also use a back-end cost. For example, its armor class and reflex bonus are the same as the main body, but when the gem breaks, it could explode, dealing fire damage to everything within 5 feet, and also trigger a phase change where it vents steam and becomes a more melee-focused enemy. This could force the players into narratively interesting and tactically minded choices. Do you risk the immediate explosion in a tougher melee fight to stop its ranged energy blast? Or is it safer to try and burn down its main body hit points while dodging the blast, maybe because the gem has such high resistances? And keep in mind, regardless of how you design the monster, the players may not know the consequences of breaking apart unless they pass a recall knowledge or perception check, so find ways to encourage them to do so, or don't. Surprises can be fun too. The key for GMs is finding that sweet spot. The cost shouldn't be so punishing that players never attack the parts, but it should be significant enough to make them pause and consider if disabling that specific ability right now is worth the associated risk or consequence. This can turn a typical boss fight from a simple hit point race into a dynamic puzzle with meaningful choices. Now, with all of this in mind, let's try converting an existing Pathfinder monster into an epic multi-part boss. For this, we'll be using Mengkare, the Great Worm, which I am adapting for an upcoming session, so if you're one of my players, stop watching now. For this, I'll be breaking the process down into a series of steps. First, choose the base creature. Next, identify parts and match abilities. Third, define the parts mechanically. Fourth, define broken effects. Then consider back-end costs, which could be phases and triggers. And last, review, refine, and balance as best you can. So starting with step 1, we choose Mengkare as the base creature. He is a level 23 gold dragon. His main body has 575 hit points, an armor class of 50, is immune to fire, paralyze, and sleep, and has weakness 25 to cold damage. He also has a speed of 60 feet and fly speed of 200 feet. And he has a frightful presence, can make jaws, claws, tail, and horn attacks, has a breath weapon that can be used to either make a cone of flame or a blast of weakening gas, and can cast arcane innate spells. Step 2. Identify parts and match abilities. We break the ancient dragon down into head, right claw, left claw, tail, and wings, and then assign each part the abilities for which it is responsible. We assign frightful presence, jaws, horns, breath weapon, and arcane spells to its head. We assign one claw attack to each of its claws. We assign its tail attack to its tail, and we assign its fly speed to its wings. All other characteristics are assigned to his main body. Now, this is a lot to manage. 5 distinct parts plus the main body. This is making things more cumbersome than is necessary, so let's only use parts for what's most narratively interesting. The 2 claws and the tail aren't really bringing anything exciting to the party, so we won't worry about managing those as parts. But the head and wings are more interesting, so we will manage them as parts. We now have 3 aspects of Mengkare that we need to manage. A head part that controls its frightful presence, jaws, horns, breath weapon, and arcane spells. A wings part that grants its ability to fly, and a main body that covers everything else. Note that since it takes both wings to fly, we're combining them both into a single mechanical part, rather than having to track a hit points pool for the left wing and right wing separately. Step 3. We define the parts mechanically. The head is a major concern. We don't want it to be crippled too soon, and should that happen, we want it to feel like a major accomplishment. So I'm going to set its hit points at 40% of the main body, or 230 points. And the wings are also important, but not as important as the head, plus they're mostly made of membranes, so I set the hit points pool for the wings at roughly 30% of the main body, or 170 hit points. Note that if I was to impose front-end costs like higher armor class, reflex bonus, or resistances, I would define those now during this step, but I think I'm going to lean more into back-end costs like phase changes for this encounter, so there's nothing more for me to do during this step. That brings us to step 4, define broken effects. If the head becomes broken, Mengkare loses his frightful presence, jaws, horns, breath weapon, and the ability to cast arcane spells. Note that breaking the head does not mean his head is destroyed and he instantly dies. It just means he can no longer use the abilities that are associated with his head part. And keep in mind that all the damage the players apply to the head is also dealt to his main body, so repeatedly slicing his head with a great axe does also bring him closer to death. As for the wings part, we decide that when the wings are broken, he can no longer fly and falls to the ground if he was flying at the time his wings become broken. Step 5, consider back-end costs, which are usually phases and triggers. Because I don't have front-end costs for breaking the head or wings, I need to create back-end costs that are roughly equivalent in value to the ability Mengkare loses. First up, the wings. We create a phase titled Cornered Beast. The trigger for this phase is the wings part becomes broken. And the description for this phase says, Mengkare falls if he is flying, he becomes quickened, able to use the extra action only to make melee attacks, or to stride. So he loses his ability to fly, which is a major tactical advantage, but gains an extra action each turn that can either be used for striding or making an extra melee attack. Within the narrative, he is angered and shows that he is able to adapt to the loss of his wings. Now for the head part, we create a phase called Worm's Fury. The trigger for this phase is the head part becomes broken. And the description says, Mengkare loses spellcasting, frightful presence, jaws attacks, horn attacks, and his breath weapon. He immediately strides and makes 2 claw strikes as a free action against the creature who broke his head if possible. He gains a +2 status bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls with claw and tail strikes. He gains the adamantine scales reaction. The reaction trigger is Mengkare is targeted by a damaging effect. Requirement, Mengkare's head part is broken, and the reaction's effect is Mengkare gains resistance all 15 against the triggering attack, applied only to his main body hit point reduction. Mengkare also gains the stunned 1 condition for the next 2 turns as his focus shatters. So in this phase, Mengkare becomes a purely physical enraged combatant. He loses his ranged attacks, magic, breath weapon, and horns, but essentially increases 1 experience level for his remaining melee attacks and gains the adamantine scales reaction, which can reduce incoming damage to his main body. And note that since he has 2 reactions per turn, he can use this reaction twice. I also included the free stride and claw strikes and the stunned 1 condition for narrative effect, since they most likely cancel each other out, a couple actions used immediately for the loss of 2 actions over the next 2 turns. I could probably end the conversion of Mengkare there, but as mentioned before, this is definitely not an exact science and balancing will be a challenge. To help with that, I'm going to create a 3rd phase and trigger, which I think of as a back pocket phase, in the sense that I'm not required to use it. I have it already prepared and in my so-called back pocket if it is needed, but if the encounter is already too difficult, then I don't need to use it. I'm calling this phase Righteous Stand. The trigger is Menkare's main body is reduced to fewer than 250 hit points. And the phase effect says, Mengkare uses a free action to ignite in an aura of draconic radiance. He gains a +1 status bonus to armor class in all saves. All creatures perceiving Mengkare through vision at the time this phase is triggered, and after targeting Mengkare with a melee attack, must succeed a DC 45 will save or be blinded for 1 minute. On a successful save, the creature is temporarily immune to this effect for 1 minute. Righteous Stand ends after 1 minute, or if Menkare's main body is reduced to 0 hit points. So, when players push Mengkare below less than 50% of his hit points, I, as the GM, should have a good idea for how this fight is going. If the players have broken his head and show no signs of slowing down even with Mengkare in his Worm's Fury phase, I can choose to activate this phase. But if the fight's too difficult with the other phases in effect, I can choose not to use this phase. Or I can have it activate later, like at 100 hit points, to add to the drama of the fight's conclusion. This is just one example of how a back pocket phase can help you balance multi-part bosses. Err on the side of other phases being light, and have this ready to use later, but only if it's needed. So those are the basics of the system, but let's do a quick review with a few considerations. First, complexity. Start simple with maybe only 2 or 3 parts. You don't want or need to break a dragon into head, wings, tail, left claw, right claw, and so on. Just pick 2 so you're not forced into more bookkeeping than is needed. Think about clarity. Since this is outside the norm for Pathfinder encounters, make sure your players understand which parts exist and that they can target them. Visual aids can help, such as saying a certain part of the monster's body is a different color or is glowing. Also encourage recall knowledge or perception checks to get this information, but make sure the players somehow come upon the realization that they can target different parts of the monster or all of this work is wasted. As mentioned before, balance is going to be a challenge. It's going to be difficult to manage and counterbalance when using this system, as so much of it will be up to you as the GM to make a judgment call as to what makes narrative sense and what your players can handle. If you're concerned that this is going to make the encounter too difficult, then apply the weak adjustment template to the creature before you create a bunch of cool and powerful phase changes. And also consider having that back pocket phase prepared just in case the fight turns out to be easier than you planned. Also think about impact. Breaking monster parts should feel meaningful to the players, and doing so should change the fight in a noticeable way. New abilities can replace lost abilities, and phase changes can alter the creature's tactics. And last, remember the downsides. There should always be a downside to targeting a part rather than targeting the creature's main body. Otherwise, there is little to no reason for a player not to be targeting parts, as they apply damage to both the part and the main body at the same time. And these downsides should take into account that breaking a part means removing the monster's access to certain abilities, and therefore should have a cost associated with doing so. So there you have it, a framework for bringing dynamic multi-part boss encounters inspired by Fabula Ultima into your Pathfinder 2nd Edition games. Give it a try in your own games and let me know in the comments how it goes, or if you have any cool variations or twists that you like to add to this idea. And as always, thanks to everyone who supports me, whether that be by liking the videos, leaving a comment, subscribing to the channel, or subscribing to the Patreon. I greatly appreciate everything you do to support me, and with that, thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming!